its kind in the state of Florida. And our CRU has made an important discovery. Now, this is painful and tragic, but it's the truth. And when you tell the truth, justice is done. Our office has identified a man wrongfully convicted of murder after spending 37 years behind bars. Today, we're filing a motion with the court to ask the court to promptly release Robert Dubois from prison. He was convicted of the murder and attempted rape of 19-year-old Barbara Grams back in 1983. But newly discovered DNA evidence, which was thought to be lost, now proves his innocence. For 37 years, we've had an innocent man locked up for a crime that he did not commit, while the real perpetrator was never held accountable for this horrific murder. The family of the victim deserves to have the truth, and this new evidence helps reveal the truth for all of us. This determination comes after an 11-month investigation by our Conviction Review Unit, working in collaboration with the Innocence Project. Now, there are 37 years of history here. This has been an exhaustive process. The facts and the investigation don't lend themselves to a one-sentence explanation. It's going to take a little bit of time to go through this. I'm going to do my best to answer as many questions as you have, and we'll be happy to answer questions at the end the best that I can. We'll also be providing some case-related documentation, as well as a formal announcement, a formal statement after I finish this announcement. Last September, the Innocence Project submitted a petition to our CRU on behalf of Mr. Dubois. They pointed out that the evidence used to convict him at his trial was very limited and highly unreliable, and they suggested that we test any DNA evidence available. Back in 1985, when the case went to trial, DNA testing was not advanced enough to use in the prosecution. So DNA samples that were recovered from the victim were collected and were stored, but were never tested. Science came a long way over the next 20 years, and DNA testing became routine. In 2006, in this case, the defense sought to have the DNA tested as part of the usual post-conviction process. But the evidence from Mr. Dubois' trial was believed to have been destroyed in 1990, which made DNA testing at the time seemingly impossible. Then this month, we had a breakthrough. During the course of her thorough investigation, Teresa Hall, the supervising attorney from our Conviction Review Unit, was able to locate DNA samples still intact at the Hillsborough County Medical Examiner's office. We got the DNA samples. The Innocence Project sent them off for testing. And the results show that Robert Dubois' DNA was not present. I'll show you exactly what the testing found. So Robert Dubois was definitively excluded from being a contributor of the DNA. The results identified DNA from the victim, which we would expect to see, along with two other men. One is classified as a major contributor and the other as a minor contributor. Being a major contributor typically means that there is more of the sample present and that it's more recent. One of those men, the major contributor, has been identified. He's a person of interest in what is now a new and open investigation. We can't share the details right now because it is an active investigation, but I do want to let you know that this person of interest does not pose any threat to the public. Our investigation uncovered other compelling evidence that Mr. Dubois is innocent. The only physical evidence that placed him at the scene was a supposed bite mark on the victim's face. At trial, a forensic odontologist, or a dental expert, testified that the bite mark found on the victim's face belonged to Mr. Dubois. Once again, science has come a long way. Today, the scientific community, including the National Academy of Sciences, the American Board of Forensic Odontology, reject that type of bite mark analysis as inherently unreliable. The expert who testified at Dubois' trial has renounced similar testimony that he has provided in another case as unreliable. And earlier this year, the Innocence Project took the evidence to a highly qualified dental expert who affirmed that not only is the analysis done at trial unreliable, but he determined that the injury on the victim's face was not even a bite mark at all. The only other evidence against Mr. Dubois from trial was testimony from a jailhouse informant who testified that Mr. Dubois had told him that 2 other men had murdered Barbara Grams while Mr. Dubois had raped her. Now, that informant's testimony had significant inconsistencies. And more importantly, this new DNA evidence clearly refutes his testimony. The informant named 3 men who he claimed were involved in the rape and murder of Barbara Grams, but the DNA does not match any of those 3. So let me summarize. The CRU has determined that there is clear and convincing evidence to reject both the bite mark testimony and the jailhouse informant's testimony that were the only evidence supporting the conviction. In short, there is not one shred of evidence that says that Robert Dubois committed this crime. And the DNA evidence compellingly points to his innocence. Here's the bottom line. Despite all the safeguards in our system, when science tells us that we've convicted the wrong person, it's up to us to listen and to act. A prosecutor's job is to seek justice, and that obligation to seek justice never ends. And it's time to right a wrong that dates back 37 years. I apologize to Mr. Dubois on behalf of the entire criminal justice system. We can't give him back the time he's lost, but from the moment we learned of this case, our CRU has worked diligently to research the facts, to find the truth, and now finally to move and to request his release. And we really need to thank the Innocence Project and their attorney, Susan Friedman. Ms. Friedman represents Dubois. She has for the past several years. And during her work on this case, she uncovered much of the evidence that proves Mr. Dubois' innocence. We plan to work with the Innocence Project to have Mr. Dubois fully exonerated and officially reverse his conviction. But that process is complicated and may take several weeks. Robert Dubois was 19 years old when he went to prison. He's now 55. He spent 2/3 of his life locked up for a crime he didn't commit. He shouldn't be in prison any longer. So our office is filing, along with the defense, a joint motion today with the 13th Judicial Circuit to have him released immediately. It would change his sentence equal to the time that he's already served. The motion will be heard at 8:30 in the morning tomorrow in front of Judge Christopher Nash. And if the court grants that motion, we expect Robert Dubois may walk out of prison tomorrow. Then we can move on to the next step of having him fully exonerated. We're comforted that we're able to right this wrong and give Mr. Dubois the rest of his life back. But make no mistake, he is not the only victim of this injustice. Barbara Grams was 19 years old when she was robbed of her life. And for 37 years, her family was given false closure on a false story. I spoke with members of her family earlier this week, and I apologize to them for the injustice that they've suffered. This is a difficult time for them. They have made clear that they do not want to speak with the media, and I would urge you all to respect their privacy and not contact them as they grapple with this truth. As I've said before, the only person who benefits from a wrongful conviction is the actual perpetrator. Wrongful convictions tear at the very foundation of our system and everything that prosecutors stand for: public safety, fairness, and justice. Knowing that such an egregious mistake could happen here is gut-wrenching. But we'll continue to do the difficult and necessary work to identify and to fix those mistakes and to achieve justice one case at a time. With that, I'm happy to take any questions.
How many other casings right now
We have approximately 50 cases that are currently under investigation by the CRU. Is that correct?
At least 50. For example, I've gotten in 8 more since Monday. So now, in reference to your question with the Innocence Project, we only have one other case that's with the Florida Innocence Project. So everybody else either has private attorneys, attorneys for pro bono work, or doing it on their own.
And how many cases have you completed, and how many are overturned, and how many have you sustained?
So we've received, as of last week, about 250 petitions since when we launched this at the end of 2018. Roughly a quarter of those petitions are outside of the jurisdiction of this office, so we can't do anything with them. About another 25% don't meet the initial screening process based on the information that they've presented, including identifying a plausible claim of innocence. Of the remaining 50%, we start with a review, and then after the initial review of the case file and everything, some of those move on to a further investigation. So we have completed an investigation of
I would, including the ones that were from other jurisdictions, I would say over 130 we've completed.
We've moved to vacate convictions in 19 of those cases. This is by far the most serious case where the CRU has found a wrongful conviction.
You've also sustained a couple cases as well, saying that the prosecution was correct.
Correct, we have indeed. One of the benefits of the CRU is that we have the opportunity to run down and investigate fully claims of innocence. So when a defendant is saying, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, I'm innocent, if you only go and talk to these witnesses, they will tell you, well, the great work that Teresa does, she often goes and talks to those witnesses. And we've had occasions where we've been able to sit with the victim's family and say that we have done the work and have shown that the claim of innocence that a defendant is making is false, and given them that additional peace of mind to put to rest any false claims of innocence.
Do you know how many you have sustained as proper?
10.
How do you explain the DNA discrepancy? How does DNA evidence suddenly reappear after so many years that is believed to be destroyed?
The DNA evidence was, like almost all evidence from any trial here, from any case, is preserved and maintained by the clerk's office. Pursuant to the law back in 1990, the clerk's office destroyed that evidence for a case where the man was convicted and sentenced to life in prison. In 2006, when the post-conviction DNA proceeding happened, frankly, no one thought to ask after determining that the clerk's office didn't have the evidence if anyone else had it. And Teresa Hall's job is to ask questions and think critically, and she went and thought maybe it was at the medical examiner's office, and lo and behold was able to find preserved evidence there.
With the issue of the bite mark science, which has been largely debunked as anything that can really incriminate someone now, how many other cases, especially from that time frame, could be now implicated or in danger of being tossed out under the same grounds?
I can't answer that for you today. I mean, we review those cases as they come into the CRU. The unreliability of bite mark evidence has been well known in recent years. The Innocence Project has done a lot of work on bite mark-based cases around the country, and this is just the latest example of where bite mark analysis was one factor in leading to a wrongful conviction.
Will Mr. Dubois be on the Zoom tomorrow?
No, his appearance has been waived because he's still in prison and they won't do Zoom hearings.
When did he find out, and what was his reaction? Who told him?
So the Innocence Project is representing Mr. Dubois in this case, and the attorney is going to be in town, and she'll be available to answer questions on his behalf and in terms of his reaction. We have not had direct contact with him. We represent here the justice system, obviously the state of Florida, and everything we can do to find justice for the victim and her family.
In terms of this new suspect that you have, why hasn't he already been arrested if you're pretty confident that this is your person?
It's an ongoing investigation. All I can say at this point is that he does not pose a threat to public safety.
Can you say if he's incarcerated?
All I can say at this point is that he doesn't pose a threat to public safety. This is a 37-year-old murder. We're still gathering up the evidence. We're still trying to build a case to hold this person accountable for Barbara Grams' murder.
Do you know if Mr. Dubois has family that's still around?
I
His mother is still alive.
thank you.
Yes. She does know, but we have not spoken with her. Mr. Dubois is represented by a very competent, good attorney, and she is in close contact with him and the family.
Is she living locally?
No.
Who is the attorney that we'll see tomorrow?
Susan Friedman.
Is she here in this room right now?
No.
Nothing.
Not that I know of.
No, I don't see her.
Yeah.
The
No.
the lights are a little bit bright, but
Yeah.
no, she's coming tomorrow for the hearing.
Yes.
Okay, so she's going to appear in person or appear
Via Zoom, yes. But here in the city.
in Borough County?
Yes,
Is it correct that he was at one point sentenced to death?
that's correct. He was initially sentenced, given a death sentence by the judge. That was later overturned on appeal, and then when he was sent back to the court, he was sentenced to life.
So what do you think that says about how profound this situation is? I mean, this was a man who was actually facing death for what turned out to be a disservice to justice.
That's right. And I've had the opportunity, as we've talked about before, I've sat with people who are on death row for crimes that they didn't commit. I don't mean because they were innocent on some technicality. I mean, they actually didn't commit the crimes. This is another one here. I mean, we've had a man who was wrongfully imprisoned for 37 years for a crime that he did not commit.
Hardy Correctional Institution.
Thank you. He's at Hardy Correctional Institution.
And if the judge grants this motion, he could be released from there tomorrow.
That's our hope. And just to provide a little bit of background, an 11-month investigation, we have just gotten this latest piece of evidence in the past few business days. The DNA came back on Friday late afternoon. We worked through the weekend to identify everything. Once we had the results back, have worked quickly to talk with the victim's family, to work with the Innocence Project to get everything lined up so that we can move as quickly as possible to have Mr. Dubois released from prison.
Is he a person of interest? Can you say if he was involved in any other crimes that were similar to this?
At this point, I'm not prepared to say that.
But you're not looking for any other people involved in this case?
We're continuing to investigate who murdered Barbara Grams back in 1983. This new evidence has provided us with a significant lead, but to protect the integrity of the ongoing investigation, I can't give a lot of detail about what's happening. I can assure you once we have information that we are prepared to share that doesn't jeopardize the investigation, we will share that promptly.
Is this case included in the 19 where you vacated the conviction, or is this number 20?
This would be number 20.
I know there was a 17 involving the officers, and can you say what the other two were?
That's correct. There were 17. Actually, there was an 18th involving the Tampa police officers from that one set of conduct. And then there was an additional case, and I'm forgetting the defendant's name.
Justin Jennings.
Justin Jennings, thank you. It was possession of prescription drugs without a prescription, and the CRU determined that he actually had a prescription, a valid prescription at the time. He was factually innocent of the offense. Yes, this is a lot more serious than that.
The jailhouse informant, he gave the prosecutors bad information. Any repercussions for doing that?
Again, I can't comment on the ongoing investigation. Just keep in mind this 37 years old, and so we're trying to gather as much information as we can, not just about who committed this crime, but also about how this mistake occurred. I talked about the mission of the Conviction Review Unit. It's to identify and fix the wrongful convictions. It's also to minimize the likelihood of it happening again. And Ms. Hall takes the information that she's learned not just from her work in this unit, but her collaboration with units across the country, and provides training on a regular basis to our assistant state attorneys and staff so that we can look out for those pitfalls that lead to wrongful convictions, we will certainly end up doing a thorough review of what led to the mistakes in this case after we have moved to free Robert Dubois, after we have moved to hold the perpetrators of this crime accountable.
How crucial is the Innocence Project to helping you guys and aiding you guys in your investigations?
Well, I'm not sure we'd be standing here without the help of the Innocence Project. For one, they brought the case to our attention. And as I said before, they did a fantastic job of uncovering weaknesses in the evidence, of working in collaboration with us over the past 11 months. You know, the CRU is unique in that it works hand in hand with whether it's a convicted person, him or herself, their family, the defense attorney, to try to find the truth. Ultimately, the CRU is about finding the truth, and in this case, that's what it did.
When you created the conviction review unit, did you expect you would have a case like this? I mean, was this kind of surprising to you, or did you anticipate something like that?
We know that wrongful convictions exist. They're rare and they're extremely hard to find. But we've also seen from across the country that the Innocence Project and other organizations have done fantastic work in identifying people who are on death row, people who committed murders, who are convicted of committing those crimes, who are factually and truly innocent. I can't tell you I anticipated something like this happening, but this is exactly the goal of the CRU. This is why we created it, to make sure that no one is spending time behind bars for a crime that they didn't commit.
All right, thank you all. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
If anybody's on my meeting list, right as we wrapped up, I sent out the release that got a lot of the details. We're using the sustain story that we did with Teresa to coincide with the story today. Joe Bird's